Doug read up on your whole background bio. So Doug can give you your whole history now.
Let me recite it back to you.
Kept sending me clips and links and all kinds of stuff. I was like, man, Doug, you're digging deep.
Got to do my research.
You have such a cool family background and then your professional background. I thought it was all really interesting and it ended in a really cool place.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me on. It's funny when I first got started and I would be sitting with friends and telling them what I did. Everyone was like, nobody cares. Finance, boring, boo, because they all had these like fun, exciting jobs or cool workplaces. So it's shifted a little bit. I'm a little less boring.
Now people fully appreciate.
Now people are starting to get it.
Yeah, now they have questions they want answers to. So.
Welcome to Find Your Freedom, the best entrepreneurship podcast. Real quick, I have two things for you. First off, are you an aspiring entrepreneur that wants to find your own freedom? Or are you just unfulfilled or unhappy in your current job and crave more? Our goal at FYF is to build a community uniting successful entrepreneurs with aspiring entrepreneurs and provide the best resources possible to support you on your entrepreneurial journey. Check out our free entrepreneurship ebook and all the resources you need to find your own freedom at findyourfreedompod.com. Secondly, one of the best ways for podcasts to grow is to share episodes with your friends and family. It would mean the world to us if you would follow us on your favorite audio platform and watch and subscribe on YouTube. We just finished recording with Shinobu Hindert. She shared her unique story of grinding through the world of finance, then taking a step away to focus on her growing family. During this break, she gained insight to create Empowered Planning, a company that educates people about financial literacy and investing. She provided incredible advice for aspiring entrepreneurs while also giving great financial insight. This episode is a must listen. Please remember to like, share, and subscribe. Yo. Welcome, Shinobu. Welcome to the Find Your Freedom podcast.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here. And I love the name of your podcast.
Oh, thank you so much. We appreciate the compliment. And we're so happy to have you on today with us. Your career is just so interesting. It was really fun kind of reading about you and your company and getting to know you a little bit. So we're super excited to jump in and learn some more today and share your story with our audience. Is there a milestone or achievement that you are most proud of when you look back on your career and why?
I think the biggest accomplishment was really early on actually becoming a financial planner. When I started in the industry, it really was looked at like, I hate to say this so brashly, but you're a woman, so you're going to be an assistant. And that
Mm.
was just the role. And I was looking at it like, oh, I'm entry level. So this is my
Wow.
position. But then as I saw males come into the industry that had, I worked my tail off in college and internships and tried to get as much exposure as I could to working, to the professional world, and specifically to the financial world. So I had, for someone who's got very little job experience, fresh out of college, I at least had some under my belt that I was like, these are the things that I've done to try. And then I saw some male counterparts come in with no experience, no internships, and they were getting these sort of sales jobs. And I was looking at it like, well, what do I have to do to get there? And I was kind of, had this carrot sent out to me like, well, you need sales experience, you need to have this, you need to have that. And then I was turning around going, well, they don't have any of that. And I actually have a track record of working at least somewhat in this industry. So for me, it kind of felt like it wasn't going to be possible unless I knew a bunch of people that had a bunch of money that wanted a 21-year-old to take care of it, or would somehow, meet the right person to take me under their wing. I kind of looked at it like, I'm not going to be able to do this job. This won't be a career for me. So
Mm.
when I finally got the opportunity to become a financial planner, even though it was early on in my career, that was a really big milestone for me. I kind of was like, okay, this is what I've wanted. This is what I asked for. Now I'm here, and it's just the beginning, but I actually got an opportunity to sit in the seat. So that was a big milestone for me.
So that's awesome. So you started your career by getting your CFP. Is that what you're referring to, the Certified Financial Planner designation?
I got my Series 7 first and my licenses. And then when I kind of kept hitting the same roadblock in the financial industry of, you don't have sales experience, I actually left to go work a 100% commission-based job. And I think we had a draw of $2,000 a month. So they would either give you $2,000 a month or you would cover it in sales. And then if they gave you $2,000 one month because you didn't cover it, the next month, if you made any money, you'd have to pay them back the money from the month before. So it was
Right.
what they called a recoverable draw. So I kind of just took it upon myself to be like, you know what, I keep asking for this job. What if I don't even like sales? What if I get there and I'm terrible at it, or I hate it and I keep kind of boohooing my situation that I'm not getting this job? Why don't I see what it takes? And so I took a job where I was actually selling mortgages at the time. And we would get our leads from, a clickable thing. Somebody would click maybe by accident, and that was my lead source. And I started to do really well at it. And I loved the relationships that I was forming with people that were trying to refinance their home or purchase a home. So I was like, I do like this. So then I went back into the industry, became a certified financial planner, did get a financial planning job. And I now had the track record of kind of a cutthroat sales environment that I was like, turn me away now. I have everything, everything you've asked for. So yes.
Sounds like you bring a lot of fire to and passion to what you do. When you crossed over, it sounds like were you doing mortgage banking? Was that kind of what you're explaining or referring to?
I did. I just sold mortgages, and then I went back to the actual traditional financial planning setting.
Right.
So it was kind of just a little. So I did it before my licenses expired because I didn't want to have to retake the test. So I knew I had a 2-year window to kind of go out on my own, experiment, and then hop back into the industry.
Okay, so hopping back into the industry, did you feel like you were in business for yourself at that point? That's your full commit. It's 100% commission with the draw, right? Did that feel like you were in business for yourself at that time?
It did. It definitely showed me that I was comfortable under pressure and also comfortable with variable pay. I think
Okay.
people that I was working with at that time, you would kind of get weeded out a little bit, where they were just like, this is too stressful. I don't enjoy this. And then other people maybe couldn't manage their money. So it was this up and down where when they had great months, everything was great, but they might kind of spend it all.
Right.
And then months when they were down, they were down. It was hard to be friends with people like that because it was, like, what do you give them money? If they're in a bad situation, but you're like, hey, I'm kind of, I've had months where I'm not doing so hot, and I got to manage this around my situation. And what do? You buy them a
Right.
beer, and then that's kind of about it. So I think you have to have the personality. You also have to have the discipline financially to work in a situation like that with variable income.
Can we pause there real quick? I think this is really interesting to me because I know a lot of aspiring entrepreneurs are looking at getting into finance, and you're talking about a real kind of adverse situation with a lot of challenges, and it seems like it's super competitive. I was wondering if you could talk to our audience and about if you think that it's a good industry to get into currently, and what your like biggest tip or advice would be to someone who's looking at really getting into that extra competitive arena.
Sure. I think the advice is looking at your current financial situation right now. I think that if you're not in a stable financial situation, or you don't have emergency funds or kind of accounts set up to do that, you could be jumping into an arena where you'd have to pull out early before you could actually see if I can make it. And that's what I think
Gotcha.
any entrepreneur, you don't want to put yourself in a situation where you're finally ready to go after your dream or your goal. You're putting in the work. When you're working for yourself, you are working your tail off. So
Right.
when you're doing that, the last thing you want to do is go, well, I got to pull the plug. I'm so close. I'm like 6 months or 9 months away from getting to the place that I need, because I can't pay my rent, and I have to be able to pay these other bills that I have. So I think setting yourself up, especially right now, because capital is more difficult to get.
Right.
Lending's getting a lot tighter. They're scrutinizing potential income sources more. So when you look at, okay, how can I get access to capital? It's going to be more difficult than it has been for the last 3 years. So I would be careful to make sure that you kind of give yourself a runway of probably 18 to 20 months of covering expenses that you have, especially investment in business, that you can go out, focus on your craft, and focus on what you want to work on to grow your brand, whatever that is, and you're not being pulled back because you have to take care of your finances.
That's excellent advice. Yeah, you got to have that runway. And I was a little surprised actually to hear you say 18 to 20 months. I think most would feel like, okay, I got 4 to 6 months in the bank. I'm good.
Yeah, if you have a W-2 coming in, we're going to lead with saying, 3 to 6 months. If you're,
Yeah.
let's say you're a couple and you both work for the same company, even if you're W-2'd, rather than 3 months, we're going to err on the side of 6 months. Because what if something happens to the company and two people? If you're a
Right.
high income earner, I would go plus 6 months, because if you have to replace high income, that's going to be a little bit more of a courting process when a new employer is coming to you. They're not just going to throw down a ton of money without doing a bunch of dating first with you.
Right.
So it might take you 12 months to find that job, especially if there's bonuses involved, anything like that, that you don't want to feel like I can't pay, for these other expenses that I have, or have to take a job that you don't want and have to kind of forego an opportunity with someone else. Another employer is going to look at that like, okay, well, you just jumped to this other job and now you want to work for our company. You can't be like, oh, I didn't really manage my finances and I really want your job, but
Right.
I need to cover my bases here. They
Right.
look at whole person. What does your life look like holistically? And if you're a little bit shaky on that end, they might interpret that as something that you're carrying to the job with you. So you do want to be a little bit more careful right now when it comes to cash on hand.
That's an important nuance that you're hitting on because yeah, it's not the same time frame or timeline for every person's situation. Everyone kind of has their own unique set of circumstances, and I like how you kind of broke it up, given the different positions that folks might be in. So fast forward a little bit. So it sounds like as a financial advisor, you got your first little taste of being on your own and having to eat what you kill, and that kind of, I'm sure, prepared you for when you later started up Empowered Planning. Can you talk about the period where you made that decision to start your company? I believe I read you had already left your role as the financial planner to be home with the family more before you
Yeah.
started up Empowered Planning.
Yes, that's exactly right. I was traveling probably 2 weeks, maybe 1 to 2 weeks out of the month. And it was really difficult to do that with a new baby. And I was, traveling a ton. And I got to be honest, I was at the hotel getting room service, talking to my husband, and he is just like, I got to do this and I got to do this. And I'm like, yeah, hang in there, just
You got
relaxing. And then the kind of the
it.
guilt would set in after a lot, many times. I think I went back to work for about 6 months, and I just had my feet up with the air conditioning on, watching, binge watching a show at night. I'm like, oh man, I feel bad doing this. And then it kind of is like, okay, now we need to hire two people outside of our home to help care for this baby. And I'm like, this isn't the lifestyle that I want. I think if it was now, the industry would be more welcoming to that I would have been able to kind of work around having that. But at the time it wasn't. It was like, you're in or you're out. There's not a lot of this in between stuff. So I took a break from work, and it was like the floodgates opened. I had every person that I knew calling me, asking me financial questions. It was almost like, oh, you're not working, well, great, I got some questions for you. And I kind of found myself answering the same questions, but I also had these moments where I'm like, how do you not know this? I look at you like you are so successful in your field, and you know everything there is to know about, being a doctor or being a nurse or marketing, whatever the situation was. That I'm like, asking them, well, what are your resources when it comes to this? So the constant question that I had after people would talk to me a couple times is, where can I get more of this information? And I would try to go online and look at places, and I would find something great, and it'd be like pop up ad, click here. And I'm like, this isn't that helpful. And there was no order in which I could tell people to go. And so I really created it with a little bit of hope that the business would be successful and just try. And I was like, as much as I stepped away from this business, I love it. And I enjoy these conversations that I'm having with people. And that's kind of what started the business of, if I do go back to work, well, what if I could create something for myself instead?
That's a beautiful origin story. Now, in your own words, what does your company do? And you touched a little bit on what it does. If you could kind of transition that also into what do you think sets Empowered Planning apart?
So I focus on financial wellness and mostly financial education. So whether it's through courses or live teaching that I do work with some people one on one. It just depends on how deep their need is. Most of the one on ones that I do are also business owners
Mm,
that need help with running the finances of their business as well. So we kind of look at that. That's a little bit more in depth work than simply learning about investing. So I can work one on one with those business owners. And then what was the second part of the question?
So what do you think has set you apart since you started doing this?
Sets me apart. I think it's just my breadth of knowledge. I think, working in a high volume financial planning company before, I was seeing, 12 to 15 clients per week working on their financial situations, and everybody's different. You could be raised in the same house, you could have a twin. You go off, you do your jobs, you're going to have different financial situations, different priorities, different fears around money. A lot of other financial planners, depending if they're independent or work for, even some larger companies, a lot of their time is spent on marketing. So they have to get out there and go find a new client. So they might be sitting with, three clients, five, six clients a week. I was seeing 12 to 15 again and again, week in and week out
Wow.
for years. So I've just seen so many different scenarios and been able to really help clients pivot around that and plan around it. So that's what the biggest differentiator is just the breadth of experience that I have. There's not a whole heck of a lot that I haven't seen, and if I don't have the answers, I have the resources to provide of where people can get access to that.
And just to clarify, your bread and butter is the small business owner,
Yeah, I'd say right now, because there's a ton to navigate, and not every business owner is going to have an internal CFO or something like that. But and
right?
they also too, not everybody separates their finances from their business. They don't always have to. There's times where it's advantageous to do that. So I typically get hired to work with them on their personal things, and then the more we go into it, it's like, oh, actually you don't have the system set up in place for your business, and then it kind of ties together that way.
Okay, gotcha.
Can we dive a little deeper into the beginning of Empowered? So your friends start asking you questions, and you start thinking like, "Hey, like there's not very many good resources out there." How did you really transition that into the current business?
Well, in my last 2 years working for a large company, I was actually hired as a financial educator. So I was delivering presentations every single day. So I probably, by the time I was finished, I had done about 500. So I had a lot of content in there. I wanted to do things in a different order or do things a little bit differently, but I couldn't because I was working at a large company. So I kept thinking, like, well, if I could just do things a little bit differently here, they would have more impact, or I would be able to provide different takeaways. And there's just rules of what I could do, what I couldn't do. So I did this myself to say, okay, well, if I was going to create a course for people specifically for this is how I would want it to look. And that's really where my book came from as well, because I wanted to, not everyone's going to be able to take my course or find me, or that was a way for me to just say, it's all in here. If someone needs a place to start, they at least can start with the book.
I love that. Yeah, a lot of people who kind of have that expertise in an industry, and you really kind of started out grinding in the industry, learning all the different aspects of it, and then you went off on your own. How did the book start to form? And then kind of now that it's been out and it's done so well, kind of can you talk about what you feel like the biggest lessons learned from the book was?
Yeah, the book really formed from the class that I was teaching. So I started Empowered Academy. It's a 6 week, I think at the time I was doing 10 weeks. It's a 6 weeks live course that I teach. And
Cool.
people afterwards were like, you should record this. You should turn this into a book. You should do this. So then I was like, okay, I have all the content. And why don't I just write a book? Because I was using other people's books or trying to find things to give people as resources, that I was like, it would be great if everything was wrapped up in a little bow that I could give to people. And so that's really where the book came from. And the lessons from the book, or writing a book, I would say, is really just, if you have ideas that you want to, it is a great way to challenge yourself. I don't think I had been challenged like that mentally in a really long time, to take a bunch of content that I had, simplify it, and then you write your book, and then I probably took me 6 months to edit it. So you're just kind of cutting
Right.
and cutting and cutting, and what do I need? What could someone take away from this? So I think it was really helpful in my level of communication.
That's awesome.
How do I not overwhelm? How can people just walk away?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. It sounds like a super important piece as kind of the final flagship finish line. So you finish the course. Now here's like a whole course guide that you can always re-reference back. I think that's awesome. Such a good idea. Looking back, talking to your 20-something-year-old self when you're in the grind, what do you think some of the lessons that you wish someone would have told you back then when you were sort of finding your way? It sounds like you kind of went, back and forth testing different things. What was something you think someone wish someone would have told you?
I think probably not to take it so personally. I think it was just the way the industry was at the time. I think there's a lot of industries that are, maybe male dominated and and things are changing. But I really had a chip on my shoulder. I took it very personally. I really, there was a couple years where I was pretty angry about it and I wore it on my sleeve. And I think that even though I did grind my way through it, it would have been a lot better for me and probably people around me if I didn't have such um, kind of anger towards it. So I think if someone would have been, talking to me back then, it's just like, if this is the way that you want to do it, just don't take it so seriously. And it's part of your journey. And it brought a lot of skills, but it also made me recognize that I can't expect everybody that I come across to meet me where I am. What do I have to do to be able to meet the industry where they're at, or these people where they're at? And that really changed my perspective. Instead of kind of honestly just boo-hoo me, it really changed that, and it allowed me to approach work from a more peaceful, more enjoyable way. And I kind of remember the moments these light bulbs went off, that I was like, I've been doing this whole thing wrong.
I love that. Yeah, those moments I think are so powerful to be able to look back on and think like, wow, that really kind of opened up this opportunity for me. What now? What's your plan for the next 5 years? Do you plan on continuing to growing this? Do you actually manage a book, or is it fully education courses and really giving them the literacy, like the foundation?
Yeah, I'm just doing fully education now. And I do want to continue doing that. I think if I could partner even with some colleges and see what their demographic needs when they graduate, because I've talked to some really phenomenal people that are fresh out of college, very impressive. And they're like, "Oh, hey, by the way, I don't know any of this." And I'm looking at them like, "Well, how do you not know any of this? I could have never gotten into that school, and you're pursuing."
You just got out of college. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I'm like, "Oh yeah, you're 20 something and don't know anything." So
Yeah,
I think coming up with curriculum for that as well would be really fun for me.
I love that. Great idea.
Shinobu, what would you say is the biggest surprise that you encountered, either when you started empowered planning or when you first set off as a young CFP, good or bad?
Biggest surprises. I think the biggest surprise is that you can, or I was able to overcome whatever obstacles were in front of me. So the biggest thing when I was younger is you're very young, and people are talking to you about their money and they're like, you're very young. And you're hearing that again and again. And then you go home and you're like, ooh, I'm really young. Yeah, I shouldn't be doing this. And I think that same thing when you're starting out on your own business. I'm like, well, maybe I shouldn't be doing this. Should I really have my own business? So you kind of have these um, doubts, whether people bring them to you or you make them up yourself. I think
Right.
looking at those doubts of, because I'm a planner, how can I overcome these challenges kind of in a laid out way? If
I
that's
like
the
that.
challenge, what can I do to overcome that? And that's been really helpful in anything, because I feel like you don't know if you can do anything until you do it. But if you think about it more intentionally, there is a map to get there.
Yeah, I remember coming out of college. I had a few buddies that went into finance, and those that looked a little bit older. And I had a couple buddies that already looked like they were 40 coming out of college, and that made it a little bit easier. And I
Sure.
looked in the mirror at myself when I was considering going into finance and going, I don't have a face for, you know, someone wanting to trust me with millions of dollars. And I still look, still look pretty
Yeah,
young. But
that imposter syndrome.
what yeah. But that's a good point for people thinking about finance. It does make it a little bit harder when you look young, but if you really want to do it and you feel like it's the right thing for you, it can be overcome. Now, what traits do you attribute to your success that you've had over your long, impressive career?
I would say grit. Just I didn't go to an Ivy League school. I don't have a master's degree, and there's times where I'm like, should I have? What would life have looked like if I tried a little bit harder here, or if I had gone after this? And at the end of the day, it's just I think working hard, and whatever hard looks like to you. So that hard doesn't necessarily mean you have to be working 60 hours a week, but hard in my sense was, let me educate myself. So when I am getting in front of someone who's like, you look really young, they have a question about their situation, that I'm not sitting there go, oh, I don't know the answer to that question. That's a really good question. I'll get you the answer. It was like, I'm going to study their situation. I'm going to learn everything I can about them on paper, and then make sure I ask really thoughtful questions while we're talking. And that gave them confidence of like, okay, I'm going to let my guard down because you know what you're talking about. And I was very upfront and honest. If I don't know what I'm talking about, let me ask really great questions and not just kind of shift them off to someone else. And then, two, I wanted to know if I don't know something, well, what's the answer to that question and how can I use that going forward? So I would say working hard in whatever sense that is for your own career. I think that um, if people can't, I don't want to say match your knowledge, but as long as other people are interested and thirsty for knowledge and for learning, nobody can really outpace that.
Yeah. And what I'm hearing a little bit too is preparation. It sounds like you're the type of person that makes sure that you come in prepared, and not a lot of people do. So that's certainly something that can set you apart, by just making sure that you prepare and over prepare. And then also having the curiosity to want to understand the goals and the motivations of the clients and the people that you're working with and working for. One of the things I read that I found interesting in your bio was that you had a healthy dialogue around money in your family with your parents. And I think that's something that's pretty rare and probably led you kind of down the path that you ended up going in your career. Do you consider that rare? And also for the parents that are listening, what are some tips that you could share about how to start having those conversations with your kids?
I would definitely say that there was dialogue. Is it healthy? I don't know that it was healthy. I kind of look at it now as a parent, and I was very young when my dad was basically like, well, you have no relatives here. Your mom's family doesn't speak English. If we die in a car crash tomorrow, you have nothing. You're here by yourself. And it was like, holy crap, I'm
Wow.
terrified. And I thought we were having dinner. I'm like, I just like was trying to dig in on some chicken here. What are we talking about? So I think that it became really a fear for me of like, where I'm going to run out of money. I'm not going to have money. I'm not going to be able to take care of myself. So that was kind of the story that I grew up with. It made me jump into this industry, I think, out of fear, because I was
Hmm.
scared that if I needed to do something with money, if I needed to buy a home, if I needed, to do really anything financially, I don't have anyone to depend on. And how do I know I'm doing the right thing? So it was a lot of fear driven with that. So I think it was helpful. It opened up my curiosity to these things. But as a parent, I don't know that I would sit down and be like, kids, you could be destitute. You better figure this stuff out. So I think talking
What's the
about it
healthier
though,
approach? What's the
yeah,
healthier approach to doing it?
yeah. Because of, let's just blame Amazon for everything. Because of Amazon, and we can just order things and they get delivered. I think the people, me included, lose the concept of money, earning it, going to a store, buying it. Like, we're not even having to go through that. I've talked to a lot of people, and their first experience with money, if it was with their family, was when I turned X age, my mom brought me to the bank. I remember standing in line and I had to, had this little piece of paper and I opened up my own account. Even that you can do online now. So I think there's an emotional disconnect between, and a physical disconnect between money. So I think it's really important with my kids to be able to share with them where money comes from, how do we earn money, what do we do with the money, and really just as much as I can make it full cycle. So in the financial world, we call it money velocity, is like how quickly is money changing hands between when you earn it, you're going to the store, you're buying something. Well, what is that business owner? Where are they putting that money? And that's kind of really why we're in an inflationary period right now, is just money's changing hands so quickly. We have a lot of money supply in place. I'm not going to talk to my kids about money velocity. However, talking to them of just out, when we get the money, we go to the grocery store and then we're buying that food. And now that grocery store has the food, and just trying to explain to them that it's not this magical thing that comes out of nowhere. It's coming from efforts that we're making to earn the money. And I think the price of things, I think having them understand how much something costs, is really important. And when they get older, I would like to try to do is if they're buying a big ticket item, let's say for school, if they need to buy a laptop or an iPad or something, explain to them maybe how many hours of work that is, after taxes of like this is this many hours of working so they can understand.
That's a good way to break it down. And on the topic of parents, this is a show about entrepreneurship for the aspiring entrepreneur. One of the things I think is really challenging. Obviously, it's scary if you're just a young single person going out on your own, but I think it can be really scary as a parent if you're in a safe and secure job and you got mouths to feed beyond yourself and your spouse. So, what would you say to the parents out there that want to become entrepreneurs, but they have that additional fear beyond just going out on your own, but also how am I going to provide for my family and my kids? That makes it even more scary. What would you say to those folks that they're having wrestling with that and having that internal dialogue?
Yeah, there's a saying, it goes, people don't plan to fail, they fail to plan. And I think that when you're doing something like that, you just want to have a plan and a backup plan for doing that. And I think what also makes entrepreneurs successful is when you have mouths to feed, because you're not messing around. You're not going out there making this big jump and you're like, yeah, I'll see if this will work, right? You're kind of like, I'm in, I'm all in. And a lot of times, children, and they were my motivation for starting my own business, they can be really motivating to be like, I want to do this for myself, for my family. So it's twofold. They give you pressure, but it's a healthy pressure, but you have to prepare. And when I go back to talking about how difficult it can be, and it may be for the next year or two to access capital, to really think about how you're going to do that. And if you can start something while you're still working, that would be a great place to start, just to have something to say, am I making some traction? In my industry where I was, I couldn't blog about personal finance on the side because it was like anything that you say is a representation of this company. So you can't do that. So I would have loved to kind of play in this arena for a couple of years, maybe have a little bit of a following, then go out on my own. And I wasn't able to do that. So if you can get clearance from your work to be able to do things on the side, that would be great. If you have income coming in and you can kind of build a little bit of a branding strategy or something around what you're doing, try to get your first client, whatever the case is, develop a product, have the resources to do that. That's a great place to do it, to where all of a sudden you start to break even of like, okay, I'm getting some cash flow and I understand what my expenses would be. I'm ready to pull the plug on my full-time job and it makes sense. I'm not making a purely emotional decision. It's a combination of the two.
That's great. That's really good advice. Yeah, that the side hustle idea when you have a little bit more responsibilities, I think is such a great thing that a lot of people don't even think about to be able to try that out. Speaking of the courses, talking back to our aspiring entrepreneurs, what are some of the like top two or three things that you wish that they would know that you think is the most valuable pieces of the course that you provide?
I think having systems set up in place and automating as much as possible. I think the decision fatigue is very real. And I know the one example that I really love is when President Obama was in office, he didn't make decisions on anything that he would eat, and he wouldn't make decisions on anything that he would wear. And he was like, I'm just going blue or gray. And if it comes to eat, I don't, somebody else is ordering it for me, because by 3 or 4 o'clock in the afternoon, when critical decisions were coming across his desk, it's the decision fatigue. He doesn't want to know, okay, at that point, I've already made so many decisions and I'm tired. And I think when people approach their finances or the back end of entrepreneurship, which is the systems and having those in place, if you're focusing on that, then when you have an issue come up, or even if it's a really exciting issue come up,
Right.
you're already a little tired. So sometimes people just do the work of collecting information about where their accounts are, what they're going to do. And then by the time it's like, okay, now you have this, here's the springboard to make decisions. They're like, whew, I just gathered all this information. I'm going to put it in this pretty folder, put it off to the side, and I will look at it later. And then later doesn't happen. And it's understandable because it's that decision fatigue. So if you could have systems in place from the get go, then as you need to make changes or pivots within your own business, you're kind of peeking at that to go, okay, well, based on this, what can I change? You're not going, okay, now I have to dig all this stuff up. And I think that's true in any, even in your personal financial life.
That's awesome. Great advice. And then this is a question that we ask every one of our guests. That's kind of a personal question, and you can roll with it however you like. How would you personally define entrepreneurship?
I would personally define it as freedom, stress, and I think legacy too.
Love that.
I think having, being able to build something that you can either pass on or show. I think for what really inspires me is to be able to show the kids, especially when they're older, of here are the things that I was doing when you guys were younger, and be able to show it to them of not just working for somebody else. I don't know that I would maybe collect W-2s and put them on a poster board to show them, but be able to show them, here's the book that I wrote during COVID, and we kind of did this as a team, and just showing them these things that I was able to accomplish with them.
That's awesome. Is there a piece of something that you look back on and say, this was kind of a mistake that happened in my career that really kind of changed things specifically? What was that mistake, and how do you look back on it now?
Hmm. Mistake in my career. I think, you know, what I had mentioned earlier, kind of just having a chip on my shoulder. I think
Hmm.
that was a really big one for me because that really opened my mind up to kind of perception, whether it's my internal perception or other people's perception, and how to think more holistically about life. I think I was very, black and white, and I worked in finance, so that's number based. There's not a
Right.
lot of, imagination necessarily. So my scope of how I was looking at things was um very much an Excel sheet, I think, if you could describe my personality then.
Right.
So I think looking at like, well, how can I calculate, my next thing, and really looking at this kind of chip I had on my shoulder of having these aha moments. That was a big point in my life, my career, that really changed. And I think opened I don't know, there's no way I would be working for myself if I was in the old way of thinking, because I would have needed parameters and guidance from everybody else instead of being able to think creatively.
Yeah, that makes great sense. There was so much awesome gems in this episode, and I think what really made it such an interesting episode for me was kind of how it really came full circle, and the mission that you're providing for people on just giving them that base level of financial literacy. And your whole business is around helping people live better lives, like giving them the foundation to improve their lives. So I just want to let you know we really admire what you do, and we definitely appreciate you coming on today. Where should we send people when they ask where to send them?
So on Instagram, it's my full name, Shinobu Hindert, and then my website is Empowered Planning. So if you're interested in reading the book or not sure, you can get at least a free chapter within it. I think looking at financial books, you want the personality to match what you're reading. It's not a
Right.
textbook, so it kind of gives you a little taste of the personality in it.
I love that. Thank you so much for coming on today. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. You provide such a valuable service, and it was really an honor to get to chat with you and learn about your story. So thank you so much.
Real quick, I have two things for you. First off, are you an aspiring entrepreneur that wants to find your own freedom, or are you just unfulfilled or unhappy in your current job and crave more? Our goal at FYF is to build a community uniting successful entrepreneurs with aspiring entrepreneurs and provide the best resources possible to support you on your entrepreneurial journey. Check out our free entrepreneurship ebook and all the resources you need to find your own freedom at findyourfreedompod.com. Secondly, one of the best ways for podcasts to grow is to share episodes with your friends and family. It would mean the world to us if you would follow us on your favorite audio platform and watch and subscribe on YouTube.